Hey there, lovely people. Welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. I'm Sammy, and I'm a writer who likes to learn about writing through reading and share what I learned with you. This week, I want to talk to you about Oona Out of Order, which I saw actually on a Instagram post that was like, if you like this book, read this book, and then it's like vice versa. It was paired up with The Time Traveler's Wife, which was one of the first books that I read when I was trying to teach myself to get back into enjoying reading because high school and college ruined the joys of reading for me. And this was in 2019. And I read that book and I had an absolute blast. I loved it. I normally don't like time travel based books because I don't really care about what happens outside of my own personal lifetime. So I don't really care about what happens in if somebody else time travels outside of their lifetime. But the time traveler's wife, he could only time travel within his own lifespan. So he kept ending up in other places that he either had already been or that he would be someday, which is a really cool concept. And Oona Out of Order does a step further from that with her time travel rules. So that's actually, we'll just get into my thoughts. And rather than me just talk about the book, and I'm going to be more specific about why I'm saying what I'm saying. I obviously think it's a really amazing concept. I really love the time travel rules of it. I like that it's stuck within her own lifespan. And I like that she only gets the opportunity to live each of her years one time. Where in The Time Traveler's Wife, he could pretty much go anywhere without there's no consequences for going somewhere. Again, there were he could just only go for short periods of time, and then he would just disappear from his present day for however long and then just pop back in time to whenever it was in the past. So in Oona Out of Order, she time travels every year on her birthday, and she just lives her life in non-chronological order. She lives her life out of order. And her birthday is on New Year's, so she's just New Year's Eve every year. She just wakes up somewhere else after the countdown, which is a really interesting pairing for sure. I also think it was really great because she had an amazing relationship with her mom throughout the entire story, but it's also, she's coming from the mindset of a 19-year-old at the start of the story, and her mom and her didn't really get along before this time travel, time jump situation thing happened. And because of that, she pops into her next year of life that is after her 19th birthday. It all started when she turned 19. So she had 18 years of just being a normal chronological person. She pops into her next year of life that's not 19, and she's just buddy with her mom, and she's got all this teenage angst that pops out. You get to witness her relationship with her mother get better. You also get to witness several different stages of life from the perspective of a 20-something-year-old. And as a 20-something-year-old, it was really easy for me to empathize with those situations because it's in my mind, I can conceptualize what life looks like for a 45-year-old or for a 53-year-old or for a 32-year-old. But I've never lived it. So my perspective of it could be totally different than what actually happens. And I don't know how old the author is who wrote it, but it seems like it's coming from a very genuine place. Not knowing how to navigate the future and having it kind of rush into you, which feels like that's part of the metaphor for the book. I gave it a pushing up to 4 stars. I don't think it's necessarily a high 4 stars. I think it's definitely on the lower end of 4 stars, if not just the higher end of 3 stars for me personally. But that I have a lot of different reasons for that. So let's get into things that I think could be improved. A few of these I don't really have any solution for, where I feel a lot of times I normally have something that I would have done differently to make my reading experience of the story better. There's just some things that the story couldn't do just because of what it is. So with that in mind, these are the things that I think could have been improved. There were a lot of moments that had forced emotional situations, and it wasn't necessarily that the situation didn't have a genuine emotional necessity to it. It just, because we jumped through time, you kind of have to force it because that's not the life that the Oona that we're with has. So whatever situation she jumps into, it's the next one that she has is very different than the one that we're leaving, which is just sort of how the way that the time travel in this book works, because there's no real other option. That can create a unique like emotional tension and like a unique presentation of a conflict for that particular year of her life. There's nothing wrong with that, but it just gets a little bit repetitive when we go through multiple years of her life, and every time that New Year's happens, we get kind of the same thing. And I understand that it's still a problem for Oona. It's still something that Oona has to overcome throughout the whole book. But like, we understand the concept. I kind of either wish that we could have glanced over like a year or two and got her more comfortable with how her life works, but it's also hard to say because she still has to do this every single year. So it's going to take probably a while for her to figure out how to just be okay with going into a different time and not knowing what was going on minutes prior, not know what year it is, not know how old the body that she's getting into is, not know where she is at in that moment, and just sort of like wake up like that and have to deal with whatever the previous years Oona had set up for her. But the repetition of that does make it a little bit harder to sympathize with Oona after a while, and we get sort of like the same kind of hamster wheel effect that happened in the Midnight Library, because we're doing the same thing. It's all the same thing. We keep running into the same instigator of conflict, but the response, the conflict that comes from it, is slightly different afterwards. I also think that the story could definitely have used some more explanations, which like, it left me with a lot of questions, and not all of those were logistics questions, because I feel like I can let go of a lot of logistics. Like, I don't need to know why she has to live her life out of chronological order. It doesn't matter, but there are some things that I'm left with questions that are more so internal based, more so than like situational based, where I don't understand the character's motivations for doing what she's doing. I don't understand why she's feeling the way that she's feeling. I don't understand why she made the choices that she made in that situation. And because I don't know why that happened, I don't know why the next chain of events that came afterwards happens. While there weren't many things that I thought could be improved, the things that I thought could be improved were bigger things than normal, where it actually had a long-term impact on my understanding of the story and my enjoyment of the story. It wasn't like a couple of chapters I felt like this. That's why it's like a generous 4 stars rather than a 4.5, you know? So what can we learn from Oona Out of Order? We can definitely learn that it's fine and enjoyable to just explore concepts, because this book has raving reviews. If you go to the Goodreads page for this book, there are a lot of really, really positive reviews that are just basically like, I love your concept. I love that you wanted to write this. I'm so happy you wrote this. Please give me a series that is just her going through her life. I'm not necessarily on that give me a series of the rest of her life, but I definitely appreciate the concept. It's really, really nice to see that this thought process was explored, because it's really just, what if you couldn't live your life in chronological order? And then she answered that question, which is not necessarily a question that many of us ask, but it's definitely one that I'm happy I know the answer to, at least a little bit. It's definitely a good sign that you can just explore. Just try something, and then because you tried it, because you answered a question that not many people were asking, maybe you will thrive from it, and you'll be on somebody's, if you liked this, read this post on Instagram. It also tackles a problem from a different perspective. So that's something that you can do with pretty much anything. In this case, the problem that she's tackling is that in the first chapter, we're with Oona and she's like battling back and forth with trying to make this really hard decision. And she's tackling this problem from a different perspective by saying, what if none of your choices matter because you only have 365 days to deal about them? How would that happen? And it's just tackling a dilemma from a totally different perspective and taking another peek at something and seeing how this crazy concept could impact how you look at making choices. So I think that that is the main thing that we can learn from it, is is just to tackle ideas from a different perspective, tackle problems from a different perspective. Just try something different. But that is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It'll really help me out. If you don't want to miss any of my uploads, I upload every Tuesday and Saturday. You can hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it, and then you'll be notified every time that I upload. And then I will see you on Tuesday for a Writing Tip Tuesday.